It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. A 24-hour guard around the cenotaph ahead of a day of remembrance and protest.
I feel like I need to go out there, have a voice, because they've been denied their voice.
Armistice means ceasefire. I can't think of a better day to march for ceasefire.
Tens of thousands are expected to demand an end to the violence in Gaza. Police say officers may have to use force. This is the darkest hour. A doctor's message from northern Gaza as explosions and gunfire reported near several hospitals. Also coming up.
She can never be forgotten because she was such an amazing girl that a loss will miss her so much.
Memories of murdered teenager Eliane Andam on the eve of her funeral. And a coroner rules this British couple were killed by a bedbug pesticide in an Egyptian hotel. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Tomorrow, as the country remembers the ceasefire that ended one war, tens of thousands will march through London demanding an end to the violence in another. Pro-Palestinian protesters will converge on the capital on Armistice Day after the head of the UK's largest police force resisted huge political pressure to cancel the event. Today, the Met confirmed the cenotaph is under 24-hour guard, with counter-demonstrations also expected. At 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, a 2-minute silence will be held in Whitehall. With the march beginning an hour later, protesters will walk from Hyde Park across the River Thames and finish at the US Embassy. Nearly 2,000 police officers will be on duty, with an exclusion zone imposed around the cenotaph and the Field of Remembrance. Police say any pro-Palestinian demonstrators found in this area will be arrested. Larger groups gathering in parts of central London will be dispersed, with officers using extra powers to search for weapons. How tomorrow unfolds will have repercussions for politics and policing, as Amanda Acas reports.
Preparing the streets for hundreds of thousands of protesters on the day the nation falls silent to remember its war dead. It's been the subject of weeks of controversy, setting the Metropolitan Police Commissioner at loggerheads with the Home Secretary, the careers of both potentially on the line. Tonight, the force insists they're ready for whatever happens.
It is a difficult weekend. It is a tense weekend because of being Remembrance Weekend, but also the tensions that we're seeing in our communities on the back of the conflict in Israel. It is a difficult weekend for policing, and our job is to ensure that people are safe to the best of our ability, and we've got a comprehensive plan to do that.
Are you resigning, Home Secretary? You have to get sacked.
So far, Suella Braverman's still in the job, despite her incendiary comments in The Times yesterday, accusing the police of playing favourites when it comes to protesters. Today, the Chancellor became the latest Cabinet member to distance himself from her.
As many other Cabinet Ministers have said, the words that she used are not words that I myself would have used.
Would you get away with doing what she's done?
Well, the Prime Minister has said that he has full confidence in her, and I have nothing further to add.
Tonight, though, a softening in tone from the Home Secretary, as a source close to her revealed she'd emphasised her full backing for the police in a meeting with the Commissioner this afternoon. Suella Braverman's no stranger to controversy, but this time could she finally have gone too far for the Prime Minister? It looks like Rishi Sunak is waiting to see how events play out tomorrow before deciding on her political future, or perhaps until after the Rwanda court decision next week. But there are many in the right of the party who agree with what Braverman had to say.
She certainly speaks her mind, doesn't she? But, you know, sometimes that's actually quite welcome. For one or two of my colleagues, just to be calling for a resignation isn't very helpful, to be honest.
Labour say leaving her in position makes the Prime Minister look spineless.
When the government should be working with our police force, the Home Secretary is undermining them. And when we should be trying to bring communities together, Suella Braverman is dividing them. And the Prime Minister seems to be too weak to take the decisive action that is now needed.
Tomorrow's day of protest and remembrance is likely to have long-term repercussions for British policing, community cohesion and the top of government too. Amanda Acas, Sky News, Westminster.
Many who march tomorrow say they'll be doing so for peace. Some to give a voice to the civilians killed, others because of what they see as political inaction. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, has been hearing the personal motivations of some of the protesters.
As humans, we can't stand for this. You know, it's against human rights, it's against international law, what's happening.
When we've got government and opposition who can't say the word ceasefire, then it's down to us, the people, to go out there and march.
It's been entirely misrepresented for political agenda, which I think is incredibly shameful.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We've heard many opinions about why people are going on the march in London. But what do the protesters themselves say? Birmingham youth workers Issa and Abdul Rahman say they'll be there with a simple message.
Opening social media, you see like horrific images, videos of people being murdered in Palestine and Gaza. I feel like I need to go out there, have a voice, because they've been denied their voice.
And all we're calling for at the moment is a ceasefire for, obviously, Palestinians, the Israelis, and to ensure that there's no bloodshed.
But there are many in the Jewish community who feel that some of the anger here is wrongly directed at them. Language used by some on the march has been anti-Semitic. The Home Secretary had this to say of the protests.
To my mind, there's only one way to describe those marches. They are hate marches.
What do you feel about the Home Secretary's comments describing it as a hate march?
Yeah, I think that, look, it's our right, regardless whether it's to do with Palestinian issues, whether it's to do with Black Lives Matter. Protest is a legal right, and in this country we are allowed to protest legally and lawfully. And my message for anyone who is going to turn up and cause trouble, it's better you just stay at home.
Georgia and Marlon from North London will also be joining the march.
I think that we're stepping into an era where a genocide can be live streamed into our phones, and the people in power who are supposed to protect us are doing nothing.
The counter-argument is this is war, civilians die, and this is a population trying to defend itself by striking back, albeit with more force.
This is not started on October the 7th. I would say you have to go back and look at it in a historical context. Also, I would say it's not a war, because a war you have two equal powers.
Not always, not always.
Well, the Palestinian people do not have the military capacity that the Israelis do.
The march is not planned to go near the cenotaph, but what of protest coming to the capital on a weekend of reflection and mourning?
What about the Armistice Day question? Is that a problem for you?
So armistice means ceasefire. I can't think of a better day to march for ceasefire than on that day. For my relatives who died in the World War I, World War II, I know that they would want us to be turning up to make sure that we reduce conflict, that we save lives.
Others will simply want to remember the sacrifices made to defend this country. It's hoped London is big enough, tolerant enough, policed well enough, that both protest and remembrance can happen peacefully. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, let's cross live now to our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt, at the Cenotaph in Whitehall. And Martin, this has to be the biggest security operation ever mounted for a Remembrance weekend.
It certainly is. I don't think the Commissioner's job is exactly on the line, but certainly his and his force's reputation will be. It's a huge challenge. And the policing plan that his force has come up with is very much as expected. There'll be lots of cots, about 2,000 of them. There'll be exclusion zones. There'll be a strict finishing time for the march and the speeches. And as you can see here, there's an unprecedented 24-hour guard around the Cenotaph. The police expect this to be the biggest march of the four that have gone before, perhaps 100,000, perhaps many more. But their really big concern is the presence, and they expect this to happen, of counter protests. Far-right groups, veterans, others who oppose very much this march, like the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, and may be causing trouble. The key mission for the police will be to keep the two sides apart. The marchers have agreed to a new route, so they're going to be at least a mile away from here. The police have got extra search powers, and they'll also be patrolling away from here in Jewish areas where there is fear of a convoy of cars of protesters who will want to drive through those areas and intimidate the Jews living there. And police have also said they've lowered the threshold on the shouting of the chant jihad. Anybody who's heard to say that, they say, will risk being arrested.
Martin, thank you. This is our darkest hour. A doctor in northern Gaza told Sky News today as heavy fighting was reported close to several hospitals where civilians are seeking shelter. Thousands, including young children, have fled medical centres where they thought they would be safe, many walking along Sal al-Din Road, one of two supposedly safe passages. Based on UN information, Sky News has verified there are 14 hospitals in the north of the enclave, including 3 which have been at the centre of intense clashes, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent. They are the Al-Shifa, the Al-Quds and Rantisi Hospital, where Israeli tanks have been spotted nearby. This report from Cordelia Lynch begins with graphic images of those injured in the violence.
Horror at Gaza's largest hospital. Bodies flood the floor of Al-Shifa. Up to 50,000 people were sheltering here when it was struck. A precarious health system pummeled, patients killed. For Palestinians, it's known as the House of Healing. For Israel, it's the hub of Hamas. And for one doctor who's been working inside, it is now totally broken.
This is the darkest hour. This is by far the darkest hour. It's gone. There's no medical system. Shifa is gone. That was a third of the system. All of the children's hospitals have been attacked and put out of service. The cancer hospital has been put out of service. The psychiatric hospital has been put out of service. The ophthalmic hospital has been put out of service. There's nothing left in the whole northern part of Gaza. I don't know who's left inside Shifa, but I'm sure there's thousands who can never be moved.
The Israelis continue to claim that militants are operating from inside these hospitals. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. I mean, you can see, this hospital is an open plan hospital. You can see there's no one. There's no one here other than the wounded, their families, and some kids trying to get hold of some drinking water because we have a drinking water pipe. They're absolutely terrified that they've been targeting the hospital, the school.
But nowhere and no one is insulated from this war. Here, Israeli tanks roll ominously past Al-Rantisi Children's Hospital. And just across the road, even those waving white flags can't escape. Met instead with gunfire at the gates of Al-Nasser Hospital. As death and despair reign in the north, thousands try to flee south. A mass of humanity, clinging on to each other, dragging themselves to safety.
Last night I wasn't optimistic that any of my children or I would come out unharmed, given the intensity of the bombing and gunfire. We couldn't wait for the morning, and everyone in Shifa Hospital left.
It is a life of fear by day and night. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Jerusalem.
We are broken, so say the family of teenager Elian Andam, who was stabbed to death on her way to school in London. Hours before streets in Croydon are shut for her funeral, her aunts accused the government of failing to tackle knife crime. They've been speaking to Rachel Venables.
She was so full of life, but this weekend, Elian Andam's family are getting ready to say goodbye.
That smiling face she always have, and for me, that is what I want to remember her with the beautiful Elian I know. She can never be forgotten because she was such an amazing girl that her loss, we miss her so, so much.
In September, the 15-year-old was stabbed to death on her way to school. A 17-year-old boy has been charged with her murder. And what has this done to your family?
Broken, very broken.
I mean, every single one of us is broken. From children to my mom, it's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's not a nice experience,
and you wouldn't wish it on anybody.
The pain is just unbearable. I've never in my life been through any pain like this pain. I just can't get around it.
Every morning when you see her mom, or what you see is just tears because it hasn't been easy for her.
Because we literally, I'm leaving with her now. I'm leaving, we can't leave her now. And this is what we are now.
Her death saw the community coming together to mourn yet another teenager lost to knife crime.
The politicians, the people in whatever decision that they need to do have to come together and sort this crime out. I don't wish it on anyone to go through this pain again. Something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. This is just too much. I don't wish anyone to go through what we're going through every day. So something needs to be done.
On Saturday morning, Croydon will come to a standstill to lay to rest a bright and funny schoolgirl who wanted to be a lawyer and whose family must now face the future without her. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Imagine a world where not falling into a recession is viewed by the Chancellor as a positive. Well, that's the current state of the UK economy, which fell to grow between July and September after 14 interest rate rises. For many businesses and families, survival, not expansion, is now the main priority, as Sky's business correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
In here, it's all about growth. Soft play in Milton Keynes, a treat for the kids and a break from the daily grind for parents. But even with inflation on the slide, the cost of living squeeze is no laughing matter.
It is hard, especially when you've got young ones. So your gas, your electric. I'm quite lucky because I've been put on a vulnerability scheme, so it helps because of the kiddies. Obviously, you have to ask for it from your gas, your providers, your energy, your council.
For us, the biggest cost would be childcare. I'm actually a stay-at-home dad now, because if I was to work, I'd have to probably work almost full-time to put the children into childcare, which we couldn't. We used to shop at Sainsbury's or M&S. We're now looking at Aldi and Lidl. Everything's a lot more expensive.
If families are still struggling, so's the wider economy. The latest figures from the Office for National Statistics show GDP flatlined in the third quarter of the year, continuing the post-COVID trend of low growth. The grown-up in charge, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, told me it could be worse, and his autumn statement later this month will try and turn the tide. Chancellor, the economy's flatlining. These are dismal numbers, aren't they?
Well, a year ago, the Office of Budget Responsibility were expecting the economy to shrink by more than 1% in the first part of this year. Actually, it's grown. So I think the bigger picture is that this is a much more resilient economy. What you'll see in the weeks ahead is an autumn statement for growth, measures that will unlock business investment, reform the welfare system so that we remove the barriers that stop people getting to work, supporting our manufacturing industry.
The Chancellor believes the worst may be over for families, so tax cuts won't be on the table for fear of fuelling inflation. But with interest rates squeezing spending, survival rather than expansion is the priority for the boss here.
I think the biggest challenge that indoor leisure has got, which has got vast spaces like here, is costs. It's just cost, and more costs, and that is easily the biggest challenge with a pretty flatlining economy that's struggling to increase the revenue.
The Chancellor has not got much to play with, so they may have done a lot more growing here before the economy joins in. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Kelly Ormerod found her parents dying in a hotel room in Egypt. It would take her 5 years to find out for sure what killed them. Today, a coroner ruled that John and Susan Cooper were poisoned by a pesticide which was sprayed in the adjoining room to kill bedbugs. Our North of England correspondent Katerina Vitozzi was in court. A warning: her report contains flash photography.
It's taken years to get answers for why John and Susan Cooper died within hours of each other. In 2018, they'd been on a dream family holiday, staying here, a luxury hotel in the Red Sea resort of Hurghada in Egypt. A week into their holiday, their daughter found them in their room, sick, disorientated, on the verge of collapse. They died later that day. Egyptian authorities said it was due to natural causes. Now, 5 years on, a coroner near the family home in Burnley says they were poisoned by the spraying of a pesticide containing dichloromethane in an adjoining room and inhaling the vapour, resulting in their deaths by carbon monoxide poisoning. The chemical, which has tougher controls in the UK, had been used to treat bed bugs. It's what their daughter, Kelly, first suspected in the days after her parents died.
When they went back to that room that evening, there was something in that room that's actually killed them. Whether they've inhaled something that's poisoned them, I don't know.
Today's ruling has brought the family some closure, but no real peace.
No matter what the outcome today brought, nothing would make up for the pain and loss we've felt since that day. To this day, our family struggle to comprehend what happened. It should never have been allowed to happen. Our family has been broken.
After so many years fighting for answers, it is unsurprising that the family of John and Susan Cooper were deeply emotional as the summary was read out by the coroner in the courtroom behind me. And now they say they will continue to campaign for better safety rules so that no family has to go through what they did when they were simply meant to be enjoying a dream holiday. We've had no response from the hotel where the couple died, but it is still open. After years of pursuing answers, now their family hope for change. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News in Preston.
A teenager has been jailed for 10 years for plotting a terrorist attack on a mosque. 17-year-old Joe Metcalfe from Haworth in West Yorkshire went on a scouting trip to a mosque at Keighley and posted videos saying he wanted to bomb a mosque. The Scottish Health Secretary has agreed to pay back almost £11,000 he racked up in roaming charges on his parliamentary iPad while on holiday in Morocco. Michael Matheson said he'd been using the device for work and the Scottish Parliament was asked to cover most of the bill. He's now agreed to pay the full amount himself. A portrait of the King will appear on the front page of The Big Issue next week, a day before his 75th birthday. In the magazine, King Charles shines a spotlight on food insecurity and food waste, highlighting the Coronation Food Project. And now to the animal which scientists thought was extinct. A long-beaked echidna named after David Attenborough was rediscovered in the mountains of Indonesia. The long-lost mammal is described as having the spines of a hedgehog, the snout of an anteater, and the feet of a mole. Returning now to the debate which has dominated public discourse this week, the Metropolitan Police says it's doing everything in its power to ensure the Jewish community feels safe during tomorrow's protests. The war between Israel and Hamas and the resulting divisive rhetoric has, according to the comedian and writer David Baddiel, left many like him living with what he describes as a sense of anxious dread. Here's our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer.
Do you ever think about the children and what happened to them?
It's the true story some speculate could win Sir Anthony Hopkins his third Oscar. How Nicholas Winton saved Jewish children just before the Second World War started. Fittingly selected to open an annual festival reflecting on the Jewish experience. But this isn't any ordinary year. Taking place in the shadow of divisive debates around Palestinian protests, you'd struggle to know it was even on. No signs or posters. Security in the last month has had to increase.
A couple of times people have said to me, oh, the Jewish Film Festival, is it still happening? And that's sort of awful, really, that it's just said in a sense of like, you know, because it might be dangerous to host such a film festival at the moment.
I was 12 years old. We were just your average family.
David Baddiel narrating this animated feature exploring intergenerational trauma.
Actually, at the moment, there's a very strong feeling that Jews are anxious and living with a kind of dread and a kind of race deja vu that comes with a constant sense of, you know, the febrile, angry nature of what's going on out there.
But your father registered you as Jewish. You shouldn't be in this lesson. You can go and play football.
A barrage of hate and harassment is the reason both Dame Maury Littman and Tracy Ann Oberman have, for their TV and theatre work, been assigned security in recent weeks.
Responses to the Israel-Hamas war have exposed a schism within the arts world. For all its progressive politics, some of the Jewish filmmakers and stars you'll find at galas happening here and working beyond the festival have spoken of a heightened sense of feeling like a vulnerable minority.
All the more reason, according to the festival's creative director, for events like theirs to still go ahead.
Security is really tight this year. We are in regular contact with the police, but we are determined to go ahead. We can't become an invisible community.
At a time of sorrow and anger, like all art, the films on show invite us to do less shouting and more talking. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and political commentator Benedict Spence. Now, amongst the stories we'll be discussing, the story on the front of the Eye. Their headline, Braverman faces sack for going rogue as PM prepares reshuffle. We'll be right back.
5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Up to 2,000 officers will be on duty in London tomorrow to help police anti-war marches on Armistice Day. Barricades are being put up around the Cenotaph in Whitehall as part of an exclusion zone, even though the marches are not planned to pass close to the monument. There are reports of intense fighting around Gaza's hospitals, with increasing numbers of civilians moving from north to south. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and the political commentator Benedict Spence. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, first up, The Eye, which claims to have been told that Rishi Sunak has already decided to sack Home Secretary Suella Braverman for going rogue this week and is planning a cabinet reshuffle. Ahead of tomorrow's pro-Palestinian march in London, the subject of the row of the Home Secretary's controversial remarks, the Mail carries another plea from Mr Sunak for marchers to respect Remembrance Weekend. The Express carries similar sentiments. Remembrance is sacred, a moment of unity, of shared British values. The Times, which originally carried the Home Secretary's comments about the march, has the same lead story. Torn apart, that's the front of the Mirror, which says 2,000 police will be on duty to try to keep the peace on Armistice Day tomorrow. According to the Telegraph, they're prepared to use force if necessary. The FT looks ahead to the autumn statement and predicts that the Chancellor will cut business taxes to boost economic growth. The Sun leads with details of singer-songwriter Noel Gallagher's divorce settlement. And The Star reports on one supermarket chain's U-turn on self-service checkouts and the return of real human beings to the tills. I'm in favour of that. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and political commentator Benedict Spence. So let's take a look at the papers for you now. Welcome to you both. We're going to start with the Daily Mirror and looking ahead to Armistice Day tomorrow and the policing of the capital, unprecedented for a demonstration of this type. 2,000 police officers will be on duty. Benedict.
Yeah, and this is, of course, the story that everybody's sort of been building up to in anticipation and trepidation. It is, of course, very important to say that there is no plan for this march to actually go past the Cenotaph. That is the key thing that I think is necessary to diffuse all tensions. Now, of course, with any major protest that you always get in central London, there will always be agitators, you always get hangers-on, you get people trying to cause mischief for their own reasons. So that is almost certainly why there are police there. They're not expecting the march halfway through to decide, oh, actually, do you know what, chaps, we're going to really rile people up. We're going to go past the Cenotaph. That's what it's about. It's about people being made to feel reassured as much as they can, and, you know, also for the marchers themselves. This is why there's a lot of police presence. It's not with the anticipation of going in and cracking people's heads. It's about making sure that everything is very orderly, everything is very calm, and everybody sort of keeps to what it is that they've said that they will do. And I think that that's the important thing. But let's also be very clear, it has been incredibly controversial that a march is happening on this weekend of all weekends. And, you know, you can see it from lots of different perspectives. A lot of people saying that this is perhaps, you know, the closest thing that we have to a broadly secular day in the UK, where actually people can come together to remember people from across the spectrum. But equally, this is, you know, the issue of Israel-Palestine is incredibly emotive for an awful lot of people in this country and has been for decades. So you can understand why a lot of people would say in the here and now, this is something that has to be demonstrated against.
Yes, and Kate, as Benedict says, the march is not scheduled to go past the Cenotaph, but we read that the the police force are putting in place an exclusion zone to be set up around the cenotaph, and that would mean any protesters who try to assemble close to the cenotaph or even be in that vicinity would be arrested.
Yes, I mean, I think it's important this march goes ahead. Whatever you think of the pro-Palestine marchers, whatever you think of what's happening in Israel, it is important that this march goes ahead, even if you don't agree with it. And I think that's the key thing that's sort of driven these decisions. You know, first of all, the independence of the police. As you know, we've seen there's been a bit of tension with Suella Braverman about that the past few days. And, you know, the police are saying, we don't think this meets the test to ban it, therefore it's going ahead. And I think that's really important.
The other thing to throw into the mix is that there are other marches taking place, some from the far right, and the Mirror just really reporting on some messages that have been going round chat groups, posted on football hooligan chat groups. They've got Yobs planning to attack demonstrators in London, calling for a Gaza ceasefire, including discussions on how to ambush protesters, some posts calling Muslims vermin and scum.
I think, I mean, as I said, this is why there does need to be a very large police presence, because people need to be reassured that, you know, splinter groups that counter protesters, that people within the main protest itself who misbehaves will be dealt with, and that ordinary people who want to protest are kept safe. But I think that we need to remember it's very easy to sort of just go in two-footed on, you know, the senseless, the football hooligans, the this, the that. The real danger comes from the far right, which unquestionably there is a danger. But this wouldn't be happening, actually, if there hadn't been rather a worrying amount, I think, of xenophobia and racism and violence, actually, at these marches. And again, let's be clear, not the majority of people by any stretch, but a significant enough amount that people are worried for this march on Remembrance, on Armistice Day weekend, and that is what has run a lot of this up. And, you know, I would say anybody who is watching who is thinking of going to a counter-demonstration, don't do it. It's not actually worth your while. The police are there to do a job. You are not needed to defend the cenotaph or anything like that. It is not a good thing to do, but sadly, we get this almost sort of whatever the cause is. If the march is big enough, you'll get somebody out there trying to cause trouble, trying to get their own sort of agenda in there. We have this, don't we? Every now and then you do see these rather small but rather nasty sort of far-right or yobbish groups. But that's not the main focus of what's going on here. I think we need to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main risk is obviously not that the cenotaph will be damaged or desecrated in any way, but that, you know, these groups with very different aims and protests will meet, and this is what the police are aiming to keep them apart.
Let's talk about Suella Braverman in the Daily Express, who we must remember poured a lot of heat into this discussion about these marches taking place for Armistice Day tomorrow and the pro-Palestinian march. The Express asking the question, should she be sacked, and could potentially a sacking actually backfire on Rishi Sunak?
I think it depends who he ends up replacing her with. I think that, frankly, she's been very disloyal to the Prime Minister.
Do you think that she will be sacked?
I think there's a good chance that she will be sacked. I think that probably Rishi Sunak is waiting to see how the weekend plays off first. If there is any sort of sense of trouble, no matter how small, I think it gives him more of an opportunity to do so. But this idea that there might be a bit of a backlash within the party, I do understand where a lot of MPs and a lot of grassroots supporters are coming from, is that she says difficult things that other people aren't prepared to do. But she's not actually very good at saying it. She does come out with a lot of gaffes. And I think even people who are more sort of sympathetic to her wing of the party would probably say, if you were to say pick between her and, say, Priti Patel as the cheerleader for that movement, you wouldn't pick Suella Braverman. A lot of this strikes me as her sort of trying to get her name in the ring early to be a potential leadership candidate if and when Rishi Sunak is no longer leader. And I just don't think actually that's the person you want leading that wing of the party. I don't think that that's the person that leads the Tories back to success. As to whether or not she should remain in post, she's been disloyal to the Prime Minister. Yes, she should be sacked. But I do think that he's waiting. He's trying to be a little more Machiavellian than she is by saying, OK, well, you've made the statements, you can own this.
Kate, is she a completely divisive figure?
Oh, totally divisive. I mean, you only have to look through even just this piece to see there are lots of different Tory MPs saying different things. Some are really strongly supporting her. Others are really distancing themselves from her. I mean, you know, it's all very well and good saying, she might well be the Tory leader after the next election. But the bigger question is, will she still be Tory leader leader at the election after that. And, you know, how long are the Tories going to be in the wilderness if Labour wins the next election? She may never be Prime Minister, but she might well end up leading the Tory party at some point.
As I say, lots of good sound bites, but doesn't necessarily make a good leader.
Yes.
The Eye's a bit more definite in their prediction. They're saying Braverman faces sack for going rogue, and this is part of the Prime Minister preparing a reshuffle anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time she's been sacked.
No, I think
no. People forget about that in the sort of the upheaval of that period. But, you know, 2 for 2, that would be exciting. I do think she's on borrowed time, though. I just don't think that you can... It doesn't matter so much if, as some people suggest, the silent majority are whispering these things. If you're going against your leader, I don't really know what it is you can expect. If this was the Labour shadow cabinet minister, they'd probably already be out the door is the key thing. And I think it is only because, actually, there is quite such a groundswell of support and this event is happening now that she's managed to hold on this long.
Yeah, and also Sunak is quite weak about this. I mean, whether he's actually weak or whether he's seeming to be weak, either way, he's not just getting in there and grasping the problem and dealing with it. I mean, I do tend to buy the theory that he's sitting tight to see how it goes over the weekend before sacking her, but he's backed himself into a place where he looks weak whatever he does.
What about this theory, Benedict, that the Home Secretary is trying to get herself sacked, then to be able to launch her leadership bid?
Again, that would be, if let's say that that's true, you're gambling on the idea of there being nobody better than you to replace you if you're Suella Braverman. And the problem is actually there are better candidates out there. It's not often that you can say that there are better candidates currently in government who aren't standing down at the next general election. But in this case, I would actually say, I don't know whether she'd take the job, but Priti Patel would be the obvious one. Most people believe that she is more competent, she's better across the Home Office in general, and she has the support of that wing of the party. So if all of these MPs and these grassroots Tories are saying, oh, well, we'll be furious if he gets rid of Suella Braverman, if he just goes, all right, well, here's a lovely Priti Patel in your size, they'll go, oh, well, that's not the end of the world, is it? And that would neuter any sense of a sort of a leadership campaign in the bud, I would have thought.
Interesting analysis there. To the Times, the front page then, a plea, it seems, actually, from Rishi Sunak, respect our sacred day. This is a plea to the protesters to make sure that it's all peaceful tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm not sure that kind of language is really going to land with protesters well, maybe with the sort of far-right protesters. I'm not sure it's going to land with the far-left protesters who don't necessarily have that kind of inbuilt respect, you know, that Rishi Sunak seems to think everybody has. I mean, you know, it's entirely reasonable to say, look, it's an important day for some people. Can you bear that in mind? But actually, I think, you know, the fact that the march is being organised not to go anywhere near the cenotaph, and, you know, Remembrance Sunday isn't actually until Sunday morning, and this march is happening tomorrow, Saturday morning. So this feels like sort of, you know, Sunak's trying to gain a bit of ground here and to gain a bit of gravitas, and it's a bit, you know, a bit futile.
Do you not think it is following on from what he's been saying all along?
Yes, up to a point. I think the difficulty that I have around all of this, you know, whether you're coming at it from far left, far right, whatever, is that Remembrance Sunday, Armistice Day, it's not just about remembering white British Tommies that died in the trenches. These were both. Yeah. Both wars were imperial wars. You had people from across the world, all religions, all backgrounds, fought and died for various principles. A lot of them did it with an eye on independence for themselves, but they did it on the understanding that if you didn't fight in this war, all of these options were off the table. And it's one of the great ironies, I think, actually, when you see, and we did see, I can't remember if it was Rochdale or something like that, somebody daubed Free Palestine on a cenotaph. Well, before the British actually did free Palestine from the Ottomans, the lot of the people in Palestine was significantly worse, and there was no prospect of statehood for the people of Palestine, be they Jewish or be they Muslim, before that happened. And I do think that a lot of this gets massively oversimplified. This is, as I said at the top of the show, really the one sort of secular day where we could all say, OK, you don't have to agree with empire, you don't have to agree with this war or that war. You can agree with the idea, though, that people were prepared to die for their beliefs, that they sacrificed themselves for that. And even if you don't agree with the causes, we should be able to respect that they did that they went knowingly often to their graves doing that, and that it cuts across all continents, all creeds.
And also that they died for the right to do things like have a march on November the 11th through the centre of London, even though we're building up to Remembrance Sunday. You know, the war was, if nothing else, it was also about those freedoms, and that's a particularly important freedom.
Let's come back to the Middle East with the Times World, a spread that they've got on page 36 and 37. And this, they're describing the tinderbox that is the West Bank, which threatens to further inflame.
It does. I think the thing that's really being reinforced now to the Palestinians, and of course, let's remember here, not all Palestinians are supporters of Hamas, and many, many of them, even those that are supporters of Hamas, are not particularly happy at how this has played out because there was this idea that this would suck other actors into the conflict. I think it has been made very clear to a lot of Palestinians that they really are alone, actually, in this, that most of the Arab world no longer sees the conflict as it did 10, 20 years ago. Iran is not riding over the hill anytime now, and that actually what Israel wants to do now, it can effectively get away with for a period of time, because the United States and other Western countries have said, yes, this is an unprecedented attack that you've undergone, and we are giving you effectively carte blanche to do it in Gaza. Whether or not that happens in the West Bank, I'm not so sure, but of course Hamas is not really as strong in the West Bank, and I think a lot of the onus is going to be there on the Palestinian Authority to say to people, look, if you want to make your lives a lot easier, don't rise to the provocation. Do not rise to what Hamas is calling for, because really, statehood is off the table for the short term. Let's not take it off the table for the long term, which it will be if the Israelis feel we have to go in hard in the West Bank as well. For now, they kind of have carte blanche to do what they want.
And Kate, this article is looking particularly at attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the picture there is complicated by the fact that there are settlements that are both sort of semi-legal and illegal on the West Bank, which is, Palestinian territory. And some of these are more hardcore settlers have actually killed Palestinians. And that really rises the temperature quite significantly. So that's, a worry that it is, as the headline says, a tinderbox. And, while the rest of the Arab world is standing off on this and sort of letting Israel kind of get on with it and Hamas get on with it, there is this concern that if it escalates in the West Bank, then that will just, lift the temperature quite substantially and risk a further escalation. And nobody wants that.
No, indeed. Kate and Benedict, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, 54 years since their last #1 hit, how the Beatles made a chart comeback. More on that one when we come back.
I'm Inzamam Rashid and I'm Sky's North of England correspondent, telling stories from this culturally rich region I call home.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and the political commentator Benedict Spence. We're going to have a look at the Times, first of all, and the Beatles, which Kate was just asking in the break whether I was old enough to remember their last... was it last number one?
Last number one, yeah.
I was alive.
So was I. Benedict, you weren't, I take it.
I assume I wasn't.
So, yes, tell us about this comeback.
So, yes, last week we got the launch of what was billed as the Beatles' final song, Now and Then. I mean, I would quibble with it being the Beatles' final song because it was a demo that John Lennon had made in the 70s after the Beatles had split up. And then in the 90s, while George Harrison was still alive, but obviously after John Lennon had been killed, Ringo, George and Paul got together to do some sessions. And this song, Now and Then, didn't quite make the grade for various technical reasons. And now, because we've got AI and much more advanced technology, it has been resurrected into a single called Now and Then, which is rather lovely. And it's number one, which is
that I didn't know.
Well, there you go.
Now there's no longer Top of the Pops. I don't know what number one is. You probably don't know what Top of the Pops is, do you?
I'm seeing The Prodigy next week. That surprises a lot of people. But, you know, I am aware of some popular music. Slightly niche, yeah.
What did you make of this track? Have you heard it?
I have not heard this, no.
Oh.
Again, because the sort of thing I listen to is The Prodigy. It's slightly unexpected. I went to university in Liverpool. I know what the Beatles are. A couple of chaps done very well for themselves. Not all around right now, but, you know, such is life.
You get 5 out of 10. Yeah. Let's move on to the Star. I think this is probably just got time, our final story. And this is a supermarket getting rid of the virtual checkout, which I find incredibly annoying. I don't know about you. It always beeps and it's always not ready to go ahead when I'm there.
I would find that I do deal with tech. I write about tech. I'm a tech expert, and I cannot get out of my local supermarket without needing the assistant to come and sort me out at least once on those automatic tills. So I would love to see more tills with humans on them.
Frankly, as well, working in the media, you're always sort of one step away from not having a job, and so actually you kind of need jobs at places like supermarkets. Just in case. So actually I'm really keen that they bring these back. And I mean, also, yeah, they never work. They beep at you. You need somebody to come and scan something anywhere because apparently you don't look 18, so you can't buy all of the bottles of lager that you're trying to buy. A frequent issue that I have. You know, I think I applaud this measure.
You're a bit of a headbanger,
Absolutely.
You've been asked to verify your age, have you?
I have, actually, yes. Before I started growing them the stuff.
I think I'd throw a party if that happened to me. I'd be so flattered. It's never happened. I think we've just got time, about a minute, just to talk about Jeremy Hunt signalling that he might lower business taxes. Good news?
Well, this is the front of the FT, and what he said is, first of all, he says there's no room to cut taxes, but actually we might cut some business taxes. So that seems a bit sort of inconsistent, but, you know, consistent with sort of the way Tories think about these things. Yeah, they've had an interview with John Glenn, who's the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, and he said, apparently, Hunt said yesterday, cutting business taxes is the thing that's most important at this stage. So, you know, if you're a business owner, you'll be happy in the autumn statement.
This comes off the back of zero growth over the last quarter, which, to be honest, we've had more or less flat growth since the last financial crisis. So, you know, it's really, really exciting times to be in business right now. So I think any kind of little bit of alleviation is probably what you want right now.
And a little bit of a backtrack U-turn in terms of the Chancellor's promises?
I do think that they take it almost from day to day, actually, with this government, because, you know, inflation has been such a kick in the teeth for them that, you know, really they can't think that far ahead because they have to wait for the latest figures.
Apparently this is going to cost about £10 billion if they go ahead with it.
Oh, wonderful.
We shall see. Benedict and Kate, thank you very much. We shall see you in the 11 o'clock hour. In the meantime, let's take a look at the weather for you.